Welcome to a pretty amateurish review of the XFX RX 5600 XT THICC 3. This is an AMD graphics card. It's been out for a while. This is a pretty late review. However, I want to start getting into stuff like this. I got some B-roll footage going. I wasn't able to test a whole lot of games, but the games that I did test, I was pretty happy with the results. I'm running with the standard clock speeds on the graphics card. Here we have Fire Strike running with both graphic tests. I couldn't get Time Spy to run, oddly enough, but Fire Strike, it went pretty well. Averaged anywhere from 80 to 100 FPS. Sometimes it would dip down to 60 and below 60. Mostly in the second graphics test is where it really got pushed. All in all though, I was running 1080p with high settings and anti-aliasing. So it was probably the AA that was hindering the performance. Overall, I mean, it's a mid-range graphics card, so you're not gonna get 1440p 60 FPS super high refresh rates with this card. And then here I'm going to show the graphics results. Got a graphics score of 17,463. I don't know how that compares with other graphics cards. I don't have a whole lot that I can test really in terms of this area of performance, but I'm sure they're all within a couple thousand points of each other. Now, I should say this is not a paid or sponsored review. I bought this card with my own money at the beginning of the year. I paid $340 for it. I'm not sure how much they go for now. The market is kind of weird, but I've been happy with this card so far. It's pretty big too. We're gonna run into Doom Eternal. I'm running on a mix of high and ultra settings with Vulkan. MSI Afterburner was not wanting to cooperate with Doom Eternal, so I got the in-game overlay. And we were getting, well, very good results for playing on a mixture of high and ultra. Mostly ultra settings. I think the lowest I got down to was like 130 FPS, maybe 120. But most of the time the game stuck around like 160, 170, 180 FPS, even in combat zones like this. Very, very pleased with the results. This is 1920 by 1080, and HDR and motion blur are turned off just because my monitor is not capable of HDR and nobody likes motion blur. But the game ran very, very well. It looked really good, and there's really not much more that you could ask for. Next game we got is Call of Duty Modern Warfare Warzone. I ran this at high settings with anti-aliasing off and motion blur turned off. Texture streaming was disabled, and we sat around an average of 115, 120, 130 FPS. It dips down a little bit every once in a while, but for the majority of the time it was 120 plus FPS. So with FreeSync and a high refresh rate monitor, you can run this game pretty well with high settings and have a very enjoyable fluid experience. And here's an interesting title to test with the graphics card: Spyro Reignited Trilogy. Specifically, this is Spyro 2 Repto's Rage. I had all ultra settings, anti-aliasing was enabled, and motion blur was disabled, and I specifically set the uncapped frame rate just to see how high we could go, and the game looked 100% beautiful. It looked absolutely stunning. It ran very good, very smooth, averaged about 150 to 180 FPS. Again, with a FreeSync monitor, G-Sync monitor, whatever, you can really get a very good experience out of this game. I was surprised with how well this actually ran. And we got Minecraft Java Edition with Optifine and 16 chunk render distance. Smooth lighting is turned off. And with a game like Minecraft, the FPS fluctuates all the time. The frame time on this was pretty decent. It stayed relatively low, and we were mostly hovering around the low to mid 200 FPS. Occasionally it would dip down to like the high 100s, and that's just the way Minecraft works, really. It's hit or miss. I'm not really sure if the game is more... I think the game is more CPU bound than it is GPU, but according to MSI, not really. And I tried it with shaders. This is Sonic Ethers with all the other same settings, 16 chunk, and this really dipped the performance down. We hovered around 60, 65, 70, but the shader profile I was using was the high one, so it's gonna take a pretty big performance hit. I mean, anytime you run Minecraft with shaders, you're gonna take a pretty big performance hit in the game. But this did utilize more GPU than it did CPU. It upped our GPU usage by upwards of 60% as opposed to the original. I figured, why not test out Minecraft Bedrock Edition? I mean, it uses a different API than Java Edition, and with 32 chunk render distance and pretty much all the fancy settings turned on, it ran very, very well. It ran way better than the Optifine version of the Java Edition. It was pretty much constant 200 plus FPS. And I put on a 256 res texture pack, and we still got high 100s, low 200s constant with the same 32 chunk render distance. I'm pretty convinced that Bedrock Edition is the far superior version of Minecraft if you want to get high frame rates and enjoy high res texture packs and still get those high triple digit FPS marks. And just something about Direct3D 12 running better than OpenGL that makes games like these far more enjoyable. Again, especially when you combine it with FreeSync or G-Sync and a high refresh rate monitor, it's just going to help that much more with the experience. And I believe you can even get shaders on Bedrock Edition even if you do not have an RTX card. And here, I wanted to compare it to its little baby brother, the RX 560. This was my second graphics card ever, and that size difference is just amazing. Some other graphics cards that are comparable to the 5600 XT, the 580 is about 37% worse. The 590 is about 25% worse. The RX 5700 is about 11% better. The GTX 1070 is only about 1% better. The 1660 Super is about 8% worse. And the RTX 2060 is about 8% better. And those are just some other graphics cards roughly around the same price point if you don't want to get a 5600 XT, but all in all, it's a pretty good card, great for mid-range 1080p 60, and it will run a lot of games on high settings.